Hello, my name is Owen, and welcome to a brand new month, which means a brand new Malazan Book of the Fallen reread. It's month 3 already, can you believe that? Which means we're on book 3, Memories of Ice. For those of you that don't know, I do weekly video recaps, spoilers for this book and the books previous. I don't go ahead, so you feel free to read along for the first time if you haven't read the books already. At the end of the month, I do like a spoiler series-wide spoiler recap of this book and like the themes and how it plays into like the end game of the story. But this one, if you read along the series for the first time, I'm not going past the parts I'm talking about today. It's week 1, it's part 1, prologue in the part 1, and I will just say, I feel like part 1s are always a little bit more chaotic because we're getting thrown so much new information, but I'm just going to try to hit the stuff that I found was most important. And the first thing I want to start with, where else to start but the prologue, I felt like this was like the most important prologue that we've ever had in the Malazan books yet, or at least it made the most sense like of how it's going to play out in the story. We start with like the Jagged Mother and her children, and then like the Tlanamas Bonecaster. The Jagged's being hunted by Tlanamas, and then a Bonecaster appears and says, "Let me take your children," and she throws them to a rent in a warren, and we learn that like their souls have been used to close this rent. And it's unclear whether or not like the Bonecaster like didn't know exactly what was going to happen, just like ignorant, or it was like an accident. But those children are in eternal torment, essentially, closing this rent in this warren. And that's how it ends, right? And the title, Memories of Ice, right? Memories, thinking about the past, remembering the past, and like what's going on there. And in ice, we know Jagged magic is very ice aspected. Memories of ice, something bad happened to Jagged children that was horrible. Maybe it's going to play into something. They also say that like when the children were used to fill the rent, something else that was there before escaped. And they're like, oh, but it won't be active for a long time. The prologue happened a long time ago. Maybe it's going to come into play. But that one's like the first prologue where I'm like, okay, I instantly know that this is going to play very direct relevance to this exact story. We just don't know exactly how it's going to play out yet. And then the second part, which I think is extraordinarily interesting, is the story of Calor. We learned in Gardens of the Moon that he was this great emperor, this tyrant, or not great. I mean great as in like scale. Horrible guy. The worst empire of all time, the most despicable tyrant, that K-Rule, the sister of the Cold Knights, and Draconis came down and were like, listen, we got to put an end to this guy. 3 elder powerful beings, we got to put a stop to him. And they go to Calor, and he's like, I did it myself. I already destroyed it. And they're like, you did what? You destroyed an entire continent because you were bored? He's like, yeah, I was. So then they curse him. They say that you're going to grow old and you're going to feel pain, but you'll never die, but you won't become ascendant. It was like they kind of curse him, and he curses them in turn. And like K-Rule is cursed to be forgotten, which we know that he was, but in Gardens of the Moon he was like reawoken, through like the blood in his temple in Jerusalem. And like we meet him in like Corrupt Stream and stuff. So like K-Rule's kind of an established character. And then the sister of Cold Knights, she was cursed as well. We don't really know too much about her, but I'm gonna talk about it a little bit later. And then Draconis was be cursed to be killed by his own creation. We learned that he created Dragnipur, which is Animatorig's sword. He created the sword, but Animatorig has it now. I wonder what happened there. The prophecy came true. And then we also learned that the summoning of the crippled god, which was mentioned in book 1, Krupp was just reading it briefly in like an entry. He was actually summoned, and he's an alien god from somewhere else, another realm, another planet. We're not entirely sure. He was summoned, these wizards summoned him to help defeat Calor. And then he was brought down, and his flesh was shattered across the continent, and then like maggots that were feasting on his body became the crones, the great ravens, which is disgusting, by the way. We learned that he was brought here to defeat Calor, and then he ended up, for some reason or another, having to be chained. And the crippled god is introduced as like a very obvious big bad in this story. I remember reading the series for the first time. I knew book 10 was called the crippled god, but in this book it's set up very, very early. Quick Ben stumbles upon this fact that the crippled god is poisoning the earth, poisoning Byrne, who's like god of the earth, like she is the earth and she's a goddess too. He's poisoning it. He's malicious. We get the scene with like the traitor, which is absolutely so disturbing. And he goes to cripple God, and then he's like, "Oh, look, can you like heal my tumors in my leg?" He goes, "Yeah, sure, I'll heal them by making you paralyzed." And we just learn he's just a twisted, bitter old god, so despicable and evil. And then Quick Ben meets him, and Quick Ben's almost threatened by him, and like barely gets away. And then we learn that like Byrne is dying, and if Byrne dies, humans will die. We learn that like Kaladin Brood has the power to destroy like the sickness, but by doing that he would like have to like kill all humans. It's just such a complicated Or it's like, if Burn dies, I think the world dies, right? But if Kaladin Brood swings the hammer, humanity dies. But then Burn will live. And that was like his original goal by getting his hammer. And it's just like the choice, which is just like a side tangent, like a great character moment. It's like Kaladin Brood has the power to save his goddess, but by saving his goddess, he kills humanity. Great conflict there. And he's not, like his conflict is just barely brushed upon. So that's the big thing with Quick Ben. He's like discovering like the end game. And obviously the main thread of this one is the Panion Dumin and Dujek, the Renegade Army, who we learned very quickly. We learned in the last book too, but not a renegade army. Only Dujek and Whiskey Jack know it's all a ruse by the Empress. Kaladin Brood and Kelor, and then the Tistan D, and then Animator Rake shows up as well. They're all teaming up against this religious cult empire army thing. So they're teaming up together to fight this. And it was mentioned in Guardians of the Moon 2. It's mentioned in this book. Like, they are a massive threat. We haven't get to see any of them, but we know there's like cannibalism involved, real nasty stuff. And there's like demons run amok, which we don't really know like what these demons on the plains are. So yeah, we got that there. But the thing I wanted to mention, like, I think the dynamics of the army are very, very interesting, because obviously there's a level of like respect between people like Dujek and Kaladin Brood, right? Because they were generals on the opposing sides of the war, and like when they meet each other on the same side, immediate respect. And Kelor, he's there as well, and I think it's very interesting that he's on the side of the good guys, right? Because he's fighting with Whiskey Jack, he's fighting with Animander Rake, but we know from the prologue he's a dastardly dude, and we know from even Deadhouse Gates when Kalam stumbles upon like the destroyed rubble of his empire, he's like, man, that Kelor is a bad dude, and I know my friends are working with him, they better watch out. And the prologue reminds us of that threat, and he's just on the side of the good guys, and his major beef is with the other player in this army, which is like a big sticking point in this part one, Silver Fox. And we know that she is Tattersail reborn, and we know like, I'm just trying to find her name real quick. The Myvi, like her mother, she was a young woman, but like Silver Fox is like sucking the life force out of her to fuel her like rapid growth, because she's already like a young kid and she was like literally just born. But she has the souls of Tattersail, Nightchill, and Bellarden, question mark. They're not entirely sure if he's there or not. And we don't know too much about Nightchill, but we know that Kelor hates Silver Fox because of that. Nightchill, sister of the Cold Knights. Oh, sounds familiar. And we know that Nightchill like has a reputation for being kind of like brutal. So like the Malazans and Kaladin Brood kind of want to bring Tattersail's personality to the forefront of Silver Fox's personality, because the major thing with her is that she's connected to the Talana Mass, and she's doing the second summoning of every single Talana Mass. And we know that they're a badass army. Tool alone was like so overpowered. I mean, he's one of the best of them. But all the Talana Mass are coming, and everyone on the good guys, Kaladin Brood, the Malazans, are like, listen, what if she's like evil? What if she has the power of all of Talana Mass, the strongest army of all time, and she just uses it against us? And that's Kelor's argument, and he doesn't trust Nightchill. But Whiskey Jack is like the one who puts his foot down. He says, I'm not killing a kid, even if it bites me in the ass. And that's why we love him, because he's such an honorable man. So that's one of the big debates there. And then speaking of Silver Fox, obviously Tattersail and Paran had a little bit of a thing going on. So they have a conversation with Paran. But Paran is also going through a lot. My boy's going through a lot. The blood of the Hounds of Shadow are running through his veins. It's making him, he says he feels bestial. He has like these like weird like flashes or whatever. And he's suffering. He's in very, very intense pain from this like power that's inside him that he doesn't fully understand. And it's revealed throughout the story that he's not just a regular old Captain Paran anymore. In fact, he's an Ascendant. In fact, he's the master of the Deck of Dragons, which is probably the coolest thing ever to happen to anybody in existence. So he's like a major player. He's unaligned, but he's the unaligned card. And he's just going to like impose his will on these Ascendants, or he's supposed to. But he's rejecting his power, and this rejection of his like destiny in a question mark is causing like basically him to like be eaten up from the inside. But he doesn't want to accept it, and then like there's the great moment where like his picture is revealed in the bottom of like the table, which was made as like a giant deck of dragons by Fiddler and Hedge, which is like a weird side thing. But just about his like destiny, and he's like refuting his destiny right now. He's fighting against his purpose, some would say. But I think that's a great conflict for him. And then the other big thing that happens there is our boy Talk. In Guardians of the Moon, he was like shot off and disappeared. We learned that he was thrown to like the Chaos Warren, and he's dumped out in this random field. Tool is there. My boy's back. And then we also meet Lady Envy, who is the daughter of Draconis. So I'm thankful that we met Draconis earlier, which makes this reveal a little bit more like, what? So Lady Envy is this mysterious wizard lady who's like kind of like flirty with Talk, but she has like 3 manservants who we learn are like the strongest fighters of all time, the Segula, which is such a cool culture. Like they rank themselves based on like combat skill. It's so cool. But we learn how powerful she is because she has these very powerful warriors under her will, and they are like very close. They have a similar goal to the army. The Panion Men is up to no good, and there's like a unspecified goal of this group to go do that, and Talks just along the route. He's like, I am the most normal guy here. Why am I here? But then like, with his eye, he like sees things, and in the very beginning is like a one-eyed wolf like sees him and does something to him. So Talk has a lot going on right now. He's a little bit out of his league in terms of powerful wizards, the first sword of the Flame of Mass, and high-ranking Segula, and giant wolves. My man's just along for the ride, but he's one of my favorite characters, and I love watching his perspective. Him and Paran, I wish we had more moments of them together, because like them together in Guardians of the Moon was like very wholesome. I feel like they were like best friends, or their personalities really align well. But I just love Talk, and that's kind of just a side note, but I really do like him. And the banter between him and Tool as well is some of my favorites. How their relationship develops from intense fear from Talk to begin with, because like this undead guy, into like respect, and how it's slowly evolving from there is one of my favorite parts of the entire series. So for those of you who haven't read the series from this point forward, like their relationship in this book is absolutely fantastic, and I'm excited for you guys to read it for the first time. So just keep an eye out for that. And then the only thing that we really have no baseline of connection to is Gruntle. Gruntle is the mercenary. We learn he's like outside Darujistan. He's working for like this mysterious wizard guy, and he has these little friends, his little mercenary friends. And it seems very, very unconnected to a lot of stuff, or at the start it does. Obviously, the storylines are all important, but he's just a mercenary. He's just escorting a guy. Not really like he's not a big time mercenary. He doesn't have any magic powers. He's literally just a dude. He meets these necromancers, Corbel Broach and Botchelane. I don't know how to pronounce his name. But they're like very, very obviously like stereotypical evil necromancers who like probably kill people and raise the dead for fun. They were going amok in Darujistan, like being serial killers, I guess. And then like one of his mercenary friends joins them because he has a death wish. So there's that subplot going on. And I remember reading this the first time. I'm like, why? Like, all the characters here we know and love. Whiskey Jack's taking up for Silver Fox. The Corlat, like, kind of falling in love with them. Like, oh, like, Whiskey Jack's so handsome when he stands up for little girls. I'm like, why don't we spend more time with that? And Paran and his epic struggle. Talk, we know him. And Tool, he's pretty cool. We all know him. Why do you have to throw a new POV character at us? Gruntle, and he's just like a normal dude. Like, what? It felt very random, and it feels very random for the first couple introductions. It's saved by the fact that Gruntle is such a great POV character. He's very competent, and he takes like no crap from anybody, and I really respect that about him. I think he's just really fun to read, and I can't quite put my finger on why I like to read him so much, but I just love Gruntle as a character. So he's there, but eventually we realize that his like employer isn't exactly what he seems. He is implied to be a lot more powerful than he lets on, and he's like taking on this journey directly into the midst of the Panion Domain's empire, and they're kind of like, why are we doing this? But we learned his employer's name is Keruli, and that he serves an elder god. Listen, I'm not one to spoil things for anybody, but I hardly doubt this is a spoiler, right? Let's name all of the elder gods we know. Kerul. Keruli serves an elder god. Let's name our elder gods again. Kerul. Keruli serves an elder god. Kerul. Keruli. I'm just saying it's right there. It's right there. So either this guy is not who he seems to be, or else like he's like Kerul's like best servant of all time. I don't know. Just keep that in mind. But because I like to think of themes, one thing I noticed when reading this book is the word memory is mentioned a lot. And maybe it's just because I'm attuned to it because it's the title of the book, but a lot of characters are talking about like just saying the word memory. And it's like, it's not like a connected time. They're always talking about the same thing. It's always talking about random things. They're like, oh, like the memory of my people, the memory of the Rivi people, the memory of the Tistandi people. And there's a great correlate line, like an example of this, where she says like, all these different groups of people, like the Malazans, like Kaladin Brood, who's a Barghast, the Tistandi, they all are here together fighting for the same purpose for like the first time ever. But they all have learned the same life experiences. And she says like life lessons are always the same. Like the memories of our people, like even the Tistandi, who are again ancient people, like with sorrow and like they're purposeless, they are very similar to humans because like just like people and like humanity and like life, we all learn the same lessons eventually. Which I thought was very interesting. And to make a prediction, I guess, if Deadhouse Gates was about like remembering your history, like marking down your history so like you could learn from it and like remember like for the future, like with Duker, like being an historian and writing stuff down, having a book like with about a very heavily, having a book that's like heavily focused on memories and the past and like remembering the past, it's almost kind of like the next step in that Deadhouse Gates theme, right? It's part one. Like to remember history, to learn from it, you have to write it down, which is what Duker was trying to do. But then the next part is remembering the past and then how that like shapes people. So I'm keeping an eye out for that. Like obviously we're not far enough in the book to like really cement that down any further, but the remember theme is very, very strong to begin with here. We're started with an ancient tale of tragedy and betrayal, right? And there's all this talk about the past and how it shaped the people that are today. And it's interesting. And obviously the Talana Mass are a people that are very rich in tragedy and in the memory of their people. And there's a great segment about the Talana Mass where it's like they outlived their own gods through this immortality thing. Which I don't necessarily know how that plays into memory. I just thought it was a very profound moment. It's like they took on this act of immortality, and in doing so, they outlived everything that they believed in and everything they worshipped. And like, what does that do to a people? And you know what I mean? Like Erickson, how do you come up with this stuff? But it's interesting. In the second gathering, it proves to be a doozy. So it's very interesting to see how it plays out there. Because Silver Fox and like what she's up to, it's unclear. But because of obviously the Tattersall influence, we root for her for somewhat. And because Whiskey Jack stands out for her, I stand up for her as well. I always fight with my boy Whiskey Jack. And the other thing I noticed is there's also like a running occurrence of people in intense pain. And how that's affecting them. So obviously we learned the Jagged Children by being in this rent in the Warren, they are essentially subject to eternal torment. We know that the crippled god by being chained is like in intense pain and it's made him sadistic and it's made him evil, right? When he's like manifested into like form, he's just like a in pain old man shriveled up like I'm evil. And then we also learned that the Maibi, the Silver Fox's mother, is in intense suffering because she's being, like, her life is being sucked out of her. She's like literally 20 years old, but has the body of an elderly woman. And it's such like body horror. It really disturbs me, like her character as much as, and it disturbs her as well. She's like, there's a moment where she wants to like commit suicide. And Corlette's like, I'm not letting you do that. She's like, why not? Please, I will resent you if you don't let me like kill myself, which is so dark and it's so horrible. But she's in intense pain. And she's like borderline turning, like she thinks she's going to turn to like a resentful figure, which is like what the crippled god is like. And there's also Paran, who this pain in his gut is just eating him alive like acid. He's in intense pain almost all the time too. So all these characters, the Jagged Children, the crippled god, the Maibi, Paran, they're all in intense pain. And they all have slightly different reactions to it so far, or they're in different stages, right, of that progression. So I think that's something we should keep an eye out for as well. Like, how does the Maibi react to this pain, this sapping of her life's force? Does she become bitter and cynical like the crippled god? Does she become sadistic like the crippled god? What's happening to these Jagged Children after thousands of years of them being tortured? What's going to happen to Paran when he keeps pushing off his destiny in this intense pain, this bestial blood and intense pain keeps racking him? Who knows? He's unaligned. What happens when he takes a side? Will this pain make him take a side? These are all things that I'm thinking about, and maybe it's interesting to think about? Who knows? It's so early in the book, and this is just stuff that's going around my head. My mind is like a whirlwind. But this is a great book, and I'm a little late on posting this video. I couldn't find time to film, so I am read a little bit into part 2 as well, and I think part 2 is very, very strong. We're introduced in part 2 to a POV character that I absolutely adore. But that's not this video, guys. That's not this video. So I'll speak to you guys soon. In the next week or so, we're going to part 2. We're going to keep chugging along. As always, I'm having a lot of fun. And let me know what I missed in the comments, because I always miss something. Let me know what you guys are thinking about. What you like from Memories of Ice. Or even like Dead House Gates and how you think it relates to this one, maybe. Just throw it at me. I read somewhere that Steven Erikson actually was planning to release Memories of Ice second, and then Dead House Gates, but then like he actually lost the transcript of Memories of Ice when he's like halfway through it. So instead of restarting, he just wrote Dead House Gates, which I think is interesting. I'm not entirely sure, like knowing what I know about this book, I think it's better that the order ended up, and I think he said that it is better in Dead House Gates being second instead of third. But I think that's interesting thematically, but we'll see, guys. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video, and expect more videos like this in the future. I don't even have to like, you guys know what's coming. I'm like a machine. A machine that's not consistent in terms of release schedule, but a machine nonetheless. Thanks for sticking around.